They laughed when she walked through the school gates. The principal's daughter, new to the district, with her oversized glasses, shy posture, and clothes 2 seasons out of style, she didn't speak much, didn't fight back when they whispered behind her back or posted cruel memes online with captions like, "Daddy's puppet," or "VIP loser." To them, she was an easy target. But none of them saw what was coming. Maya had grown up knowing her father ran the school. That didn't make her proud. It made her cautious. Careful. It meant expectations were higher, judgment sharper, and mistakes far less forgivable. So she kept to herself. She read during lunch. She sat in the front row and handed in assignments early. But none of that mattered when a group of seniors, popular, privileged, and proud, decided she was weak. And weakness, to them, was entertainment. They started small, locker pranks, gum on her seat, fake love letters slipped into her bag. The kind of bullying you could laugh off if you were stronger. But it escalated. They recorded her in the bathroom. They edited her face onto embarrassing videos. They even vandalized her locker with red spray paint spelling out, "Principal's little puppet." Her father, Principal Harris, called for meetings, launched investigations. But it all led nowhere. Students lied. Cameras were mysteriously turned off. Parents of the bullies defended their brilliant children with lawyer slick tongues. Harris was forced to act like it wasn't personal. Like it wasn't his own daughter crying herself to sleep every night. But what they didn't know, what none of them realized, was that Maya wasn't the only one watching. There's something terrifying about someone who absorbs pain without reacting, who observes cruelty without flinching, because they are not helpless. They are calculating. It started with a message. The ringleader of the bullies, Troy Bennett, found a note in his locker, smile wide. The world's watching now. He thought it was a joke, until a clip surfaced online of him cheating during a chemistry exam. Recorded clearly, time-stamped, untraceable. He was suspended for a week. When he returned, a rumor started that his father, a board member, had paid for his SAT answers. No one knew who started the rumor, but suddenly, Troy's college prospects crumbled. Offers vanished, reputation soared. His father was investigated. And Maya, she never said a word. Then came Lisa, the Instagram queen who'd led the campaign to humiliate Maya with those viral videos. Her account was hacked, except not in the usual way. Her private messages leaked, ugly ones, racist jokes, screenshots of her mocking her best friends. The fallout was brutal. Within 48 hours, Lisa lost her brand deals, her following collapsed, and her parents, who ran a local boutique, were boycotted. She went dark. Her last post, a black screen with the words, "I finally see what it's like to be humiliated." One by one, they fell. Caleb, who had started the rumor about Maya having a crush on a teacher, was caught with stolen exam papers. Papers he didn't even know were being tracked. Suspension, public disgrace, his scholarship, gone. Jasmine, who filmed Maya crying and posted it to a group chat for laughs, woke up to find her own confidential medical records on school forums. Nothing life-threatening, but private enough to sting. Her parents sued the school. The investigation traced the breach to a system only accessed by the student council IT rep, who had recently started dating Maya. Coincidence? No. Karma. Closer. But the truth was darker. It was calculated revenge. Maya didn't destroy them alone, but she orchestrated every piece. Every exposed secret, every downfall, every perfectly timed leak. Not through violence, not through shouting, through precision. She found their weaknesses, their hypocrisies, and turned them against each other. She learned how systems worked, how people's secrets lived in phones, in lockers, in whispers, and most of all, how no one expects the quiet girl to be dangerous. By the time they realized, it was too late. Parents cried foul, lawyers threatened action, but the evidence was too neat, too clean. Nothing could be pinned directly on her. No fingerprints, no confessions, just a trail of poetic justice that left the school shaken to its core. And Maya, she started walking a little taller. She didn't need to scream or boast. Her silence spoke louder than any threat. Principal Harris never asked his daughter if she was behind it. But one day, as they sat in the car after school, he looked at her through the rearview mirror and asked, "Did you make them pay?" She didn't look up from her book. She just replied, calmly, "They made themselves pay." I just held up the mirror. Because sometimes, the most dangerous person isn't the loudest, the strongest, or the most popular. It's the one you underestimate. And when you mock the principal's daughter, when you mistake kindness for weakness, you better be ready to pay the ultimate price. They made themselves pay. I just held up the mirror. That single sentence echoed louder than any confession. It wasn't said with pride or vengeance. It wasn't meant to impress or to frighten. It was said with eerie calm, like someone simply stating a fact, like reading a line from a weather report. But behind those few words lay a truth far more terrifying than any act of direct revenge, because it revealed that Maya didn't have to create destruction. She only had to reflect it. She understood that cruelty, once revealed, collapses under its own weight. In a school where appearances were everything, where students painted on smiles and reputations like stage makeup, Maya became the one holding up the spotlight. And what do most people do when the spotlight finds them at their worst? They flinch. They hide. They break. The same students who laughed the loudest, who acted untouchable in their halls of popularity, began to unravel the moment their secrets were no longer secrets. Their masks slipped. Their voices trembled. They scrambled for explanations, apologies, justifications, but none of that worked. Because by then, the truth had already been seen. And that's what made Maya so dangerous. She didn't shout or fight back in the way they expected. She didn't beg for help or write long social media posts about her pain. She listened. She watched. She waited. And most of all, she remembered. Every cruel laugh, every message, every betrayal. But instead of reacting with emotion, she reacted with strategy. Not because she was heartless, but because she understood what kind of battlefield she was on. And on that battlefield, silence was power. She realized something most people don't learn until it's too late. You don't have to lift a finger to destroy someone who has already planted the seeds of their own downfall. All you have to do is water the truth, let it grow, let it show. Troy cheated. Lisa mocked. Caleb stole. Jasmine invaded privacy. These weren't crimes invented by Maya. They were already there, buried beneath confidence and fake perfection. All Maya did was find a way to shine a light into the cracks. She didn't hack systems to invent lies. She used what was already there. Secrets. Flaws. Evidence. And in the end, it wasn't her actions that ruined them. It was their own. But what truly set her apart wasn't just her intelligence or her patience. It was her understanding of power. Power doesn't always come from being feared. Sometimes it comes from being forgotten. From being underestimated. The quiet girl. The bookworm. The principal's daughter. They thought she was weak. But she was just playing a longer game. And when the game ended, she didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She just walked on, her hands clean, her conscience quieter than ever. And yet, the students who once tormented her began to fear every quiet corner of the school, every anonymous message, every glance in the hallway, because they no longer knew who might be watching. They no longer knew what part of themselves might be exposed next. Paranoia grew, friendships fractured, trust disintegrated, and the school, once loud and cruel, became haunted by its own reflection. The principal never confirmed his daughter's role in what happened, but he knew. A father knows. And perhaps, on some level, he wasn't angry. He had tried to protect her through the system, through rules and policies. But the system had failed. Justice never came through official reports or disciplinary action. It came through truth, through exposure, through reflection. Because when people are forced to look in the mirror, really look, some run, some break, some lash out. But others, the few like Maya, stand still, calm, unshaken. Not because they're invincible, but because they've already faced the worst. They've already survived the mockery, the humiliation, the silence. And once you survive that, there's nothing left to fear. So yes, they made themselves pay. Maya just held up the mirror, and sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. You don't have to lift a finger to destroy someone who has already planted the seeds of their own downfall. That idea is chilling, not because it implies passivity, but because it reveals the brutal power of observation and timing. Maya didn't need to scream, didn't need to throw a punch, didn't even need to speak out loud. She understood something about human nature that most people miss: the truth. Once it escapes, it doesn't need anyone to guide it. It finds its way into the cracks, the crevices, the hollow places people try to fill with lies and masks. And eventually it blooms, whether you're ready for it or not. The seeds of downfall are planted with every choice. Every cruel comment, every stolen answer, every moment someone believes they're above consequence. Maya watched those seeds take root. She saw Troy laughing as he rigged an exam. She heard Lisa whispering about others like they were objects. She witnessed the smirks, the eye rolls, the way they treated people like tools for their amusement. And all the while, they thought no one was paying attention. They believed their actions were invisible, protected by status and charm and parents with too much influence. But the truth is, the world is always watching. People forget that. They act like the things they do behind closed doors, online, in whispers, in group chats, are locked away forever. But Maya understood the reality: nothing is hidden forever. Not when you know where to look. Not when you know how to wait. She didn't fabricate their mistakes. She didn't twist the truth. She simply let it breathe. Like smoke in a sealed room, it was always going to rise, always going to choke. Troy thought he was clever, thought cheating was a harmless shortcut. But when the truth came out, it wasn't just the test he lost, it was his future. The trust in him was gone, and once trust is broken, especially in a world built on achievements and expectations, it's nearly impossible to repair. He spiraled, not because someone attacked him, but because his life was built on a lie, and Maya simply let the light in. Lisa built her empire on a carefully crafted image, perfect selfies, manufactured kindness, fake activism. But beneath it, she was cruel, calculating, and fake. When her private messages leaked, it wasn't a hack that ruined her. It was her own words, her own unfiltered self. The version she never thought anyone would see. And when people did see it, they turned. Not because Maya forced them to, but because the illusion shattered, and people don't follow broken idols. And that's what Maya mastered, the power of letting people trip over their own shadows. Caleb, Jasmine, they were no different. Every smug moment, every decision to laugh at someone's pain, every shortcut, every backstab, they all added up. And when the mirror was held up, when the reflection stared back at them, it was no one else's fault but their own. They destroyed themselves. Maya just gave them the space to do it. Because that's the secret no one talks about. Destruction doesn't always come from outside. The most brutal consequences often come from within. From the moment you convince yourself that you'll never get caught, that you're smarter, untouchable, above the rules, that's when the seeds are planted. And when they bloom, they don't just ruin your reputation, they reveal who you always were beneath the surface. Maya didn't need to scream for justice. She let justice unfold, naturally, slowly, beautifully. And when it did, no one could trace it back to her. No one could prove she did anything at all. Because she didn't plant the seeds. She just watered them, quietly, patiently. That's what made her unstoppable. She understood that the world doesn't need a storm to fall apart. Sometimes, it just needs the truth. And when that truth starts to spread, it burns through facades like fire through dry grass. They thought they could humiliate her, that they could define her. But the moment they showed the world who they really were, Maya didn't need to defend herself. She just had to step back, watch, let the pieces fall exactly where they belonged. And they did, because you don't have to destroy people who've already chosen to build their lives on lies. You don't have to tear them down when they've tied themselves to fragile illusions. Eventually, those illusions collapse. And when they do, all that's left is the truth. Because you don't have to destroy people who've already chosen to build their lives on lies. That idea isn't just poetic. It's powerful and terrifying in its simplicity. Lies are fragile things. They seem strong when they're held together by status, attention, or fear, but underneath, they're hollow, empty. And like a house of cards built on shaky ground, they only need a slight tremor, a whisper of truth, to collapse. Maya understood this deeply. She didn't need to scream for justice, didn't need to confront anyone in the hallway, or make emotional speeches about how she'd been wronged. No, she just had to be still, watch, and wait for gravity to do the work. And gravity always works. When someone builds their world on lies, there's always a point where they forget which lie came first. The threads tangle, the performances blur, and eventually they slip. They say the wrong thing, trust the wrong person, or take one risk too many. Maya didn't rush their collapse. She simply made sure no one caught them when they fell. She didn't have to push. She didn't have to touch a thing. She just had to make sure the truth had room to breathe. And truth, once freed, is relentless. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention. It moves silently, weaving into conversations, passing through screenshots, whispered in bathrooms and behind closed doors. That's how it took down Troy. The moment his truth came out, the lies he'd built about his intelligence, his leadership, his future, began to rot. No one could trust him anymore. Not teachers, not colleges, not even his friends. Because once someone's truth is exposed, even those who once stood beside them start stepping away. No one wants to be collateral damage. Lisa felt the same way. She was never real, not really. Her persona was built like a glass statue, shiny on the outside, but fragile beneath. When her secret spilled, there wasn't even a dramatic explosion. It was more like a quiet shattering, a collapse that happened in slow motion. And the worst part, Everyone saw it coming. They just needed permission to admit it. The leaks gave them that permission. Her fall wasn't loud. It was inevitable. Maya never said a word to her, never messaged her, never acknowledged her at all. But that silence said more than any confrontation could have. It wasn't just power. It was precision. It was control. Because Maya had figured something out most people never do. If someone's lies are loud enough, all you have to do is stop covering your ears. You don't have to argue. You don't have to fight. You don't even have to explain. Just let them talk. Let them keep lying. Keep digging. They'll do all the work for you. That's what happened with Caleb. He believed he was untouchable. He thought he could manipulate teachers, steal, cheat, charm his way out of anything. But the minute one truth slipped out, a paper he shouldn't have had, a message sent to the wrong person, it was like a spark landing in dry brush. The fire spread fast, and Maya, she never touched a match. People started to notice the pattern, even if they didn't speak it out loud. The ones who had mocked to the worst were all falling, one by one. And yet, there was no trail, no evidence, just silence. And silence, when it surrounds destruction, becomes its own kind of noise. Fear crept in. Not fear of Maya directly. No one had anything concrete to accuse her of. But fear of what she might know, of what she might see. Every glance from her in the hallway felt heavy. Every time she opened her notebook in class, someone flinched, wondering if she was writing about them. And yet, Maya didn't change. She didn't become loud, didn't grow smug. She didn't threaten or taunt. She just kept walking with that same quiet presence. But now, it wasn't ignored, it was respected, or feared. Because once someone understands that lies are self-destructive, they hold an invisible power. They become a mirror, and mirrors don't lie, they simply reflect. Maya had become a mirror. Every bully, every manipulator, every fake smile, they saw themselves now. Really saw themselves. And it horrified them. Not because they were ashamed, but because they realized someone else could see it too. Someone who wasn't afraid. Someone who couldn't be silenced or intimidated. Because when you build your life on lies, and someone comes along who cannot be fooled, cannot be swayed, cannot be tricked, you don't just fear them. You respect them, even if you never say it. So Maya never had to destroy anyone. They did that all on their own. She just made sure they saw it happen. She just made sure they saw it happen. That's the part that mattered most. Not just the fall, not just the unraveling, but the awareness. The clarity. Maya understood that punishment without understanding is hollow. People might suffer, but they don't change unless they see what they've done, unless they confront the truth of it, without excuses, without distractions. That's what made Maya's silent revenge so complete. It wasn't about chaos. It was about exposure. And not just exposure to the world, but to themselves. When Troy watched his future slip through his fingers, it wasn't the suspension that broke him. It was the mirror of his own dishonesty. Seeing how quickly people withdrew their trust, how fast respect crumbled. All the handshakes, the admiration, the promises of scholarships, they dried up like dust. And worst of all, no one defended him. Even his closest friends hesitated, because deep down they all knew. They'd seen it. They'd laughed at it. They'd done the same things. And now, they wondered who might be next. Maya didn't just make people fall. She made them watch themselves fall. Slowly, in real time. Lisa's collapse was even more brutal in that sense. She had built a kingdom out of aesthetics. Every post, every smile, every caption was designed to seduce attention. And when it was all ripped away, not by lies, but by her own words, she was left staring at a version of herself she never wanted anyone to see. The screenshots, the recordings, the leaks, they weren't doctored. They were real, unfiltered, ugly, and that's the part that haunted her. It wasn't that she was exposed, it was that she had nothing to say in her defense. Because it was all her. And Maya, she didn't gloat. She didn't celebrate. She simply allowed Lisa to see herself. That's what Maya's revenge truly was. Not destruction, not vengeance, not even justice. It was revelation. A cold, quiet, unflinching reveal of who people really were when no one was looking. She didn't build traps. She didn't frame anyone. She just observed. She listened. She waited. And then she reflected the truth back at them, like holding a mirror to a monster's face. Even the bystanders felt it. Those who hadn't mocked her directly but had laughed along, stayed silent, shared posts without questioning. They started to look over their shoulders too, wondering if Maya had seen them, wondering if they were next. Because now the question wasn't, is Maya dangerous? The question was, what does she know? And that uncertainty, that paranoia, it spread faster than any rumor. Because in a school built on performance and popularity, there is no fear greater than being seen. Not the version you pretend to be, but the version you really are. The version you thought no one would ever notice. Maya noticed. And that's what made her terrifying. Even Caleb, who had always thought he was clever enough to slip through the cracks, started to unravel. He didn't just lose opportunities. He lost control. Because once Maya's quiet presence became associated with consequence, every lie he told, every shortcut he took, came with fear. Fear that this time, someone would notice. That this time, the mirror would turn toward him. And that fear began to change people, quietly, but unmistakably. Students became more careful, not out of morality, but out of fear of being exposed. Some started deleting old messages. Others apologized for things they weren't even sure Maya had seen. Teachers noticed the shift. Parents asked questions. Something had changed in the halls of that school. It wasn't just Maya who had power now, it was the truth itself. And once the truth has a name, a face, a silent witness, it never goes back into hiding. Maya didn't seek control. She didn't need to. Her strength wasn't in domination. It was in clarity, in seeing what others refused to see, in staying silent long enough for people to destroy themselves, then simply showing them the wreckage. Not to gloat, not to preach, but to ensure they saw it, felt it, understood it. And that understanding was the real punishment. Because the worst kind of justice is the kind that doesn't need violence. It doesn't need shouting. It doesn't even need proof. It just needs a reflection. Clear, undeniable, merciless. A truth so sharp it cuts without ever being thrown. That was Maya's gift. And her curse. Because while others feared her, respected her, even admired her from a distance, she remained alone. Not out of bitterness, but out of choice. Because she knew what people were capable of. She had seen the masks. She had heard the whispers. She had walked through the fire and come out not unscarred, but unshaken. And in that silence, she had found something far more powerful than revenge. She had found clarity. And once you see people clearly, once you see the lies they wear like armor, the cruelty they hide behind jokes, the fear behind their arrogance, it's hard to unsee it. It's hard to trust, hard to forgive, hard to ever go back to pretending that none of it matters. So Maya walked the halls, not with rage or sorrow, but with purpose. Not to hurt, not to win, but simply to watch, and make sure they saw themselves too. Not to hurt, not to win, but simply to watch, and make sure they saw themselves too. That idea, that stillness, that cold and quiet awareness, it was what truly set Maya apart. Everyone else was busy performing. They lived for attention, for dominance, for the applause of their peers, constantly wearing faces that didn't belong to them. But Maya didn't need a mask. She didn't need to be liked. She didn't even need to be understood. Her only purpose was to reveal, to show people who they really were when no one was looking. And in that, she became more than just the principal's daughter. She became the consequence they never saw coming. For years, people like Troy, Lisa, Caleb, and Jasmine thrived because they believed consequences were things that happened to other people. They believed they were special, protected. Their lies had always worked. Their charm always bought them time. But no one escapes forever. And what Maya gave them wasn't just exposure. It was awareness. They didn't fall because of what she did. They fell because they finally saw themselves clearly. And so did everyone else. And the brilliance of it all was that Maya never laid a hand on anyone. She never made threats, never raised her voice, never retaliated in the ways they expected. She didn't trade insult for insult. She didn't play their game. That's what made her so unforgettable. They were used to drama, to fights, to messy confrontations they could spin and manipulate. But with Maya, there was nothing to spin, because she gave them nothing, and in that nothing, they drowned. It's easy to ignore pain when the person you've hurt tries to beg or scream. You can call them weak, emotional, oversensitive. But it's different when they don't flinch, when they meet your cruelty with silence, when they look at you and don't blink. That silence is haunting. It stays with you. And Maya's silence. It was the loudest thing any of them had ever heard. They started seeing her differently. Not all at once, but gradually, like a shadow you can't shake. She would walk into a room, and conversations would shift. Eyes would dart. People would lower their voices. Not because she said anything, but because they didn't know what she might have heard, what she might already know. She had turned the entire school into a hall of mirrors, and no one could tell which ones were real. Even the teachers noticed. Some were relieved by the change in behavior, the sudden drop in disciplinary issues, the quieter halls, the polite classroom tones. But others felt something darker. They felt the fear, the tension, the way students had started policing themselves not out of integrity, but out of paranoia. That wasn't something a principal could fix. That wasn't something they could put in a report. And Principal Harris, he knew. He didn't say it aloud. But he knew his daughter had done something no school policy ever could. She'd ended the cruelty, not with rules, not with suspensions, but with the truth. A truth so clean and sharp, it cut through everything fake, and it forced people to see themselves. Even he had to admit, he had underestimated her. He had thought she was breaking. All those nights he heard her crying behind her door, all those mornings she walked past him with eyes that seemed far too tired for someone her age. He thought she might crumble. That the pressure, the humiliation, the isolation would crush her. But he was wrong. She wasn't breaking. She was watching. And while the world mocked her, she was quietly building something they would never be able to tear down. Clarity, strength, truth. The same students who had laughed at her now avoided her gaze. Not because she had changed, but because they had. They had seen what happened to the ones who underestimated her. They had watched as those who built their lives on lies came undone without a single word from her. And now, they were afraid. Not of what she might do, but of what she might already know. That was Maya's power. She made everyone question themselves. Made everyone wonder, what if she saw me? What if she heard me say that? What if she has something on me, too? That fear was never confirmed. She never used it to control. She never even acknowledged it. But it was there, in every whisper, in every awkward glance, in every carefully chosen word that students now spoke in her presence. And that was enough. Maya didn't need to be feared. She didn't need to be loved. She didn't want revenge. Not really. What she wanted was understanding. She wanted them to feel what she had felt. Not through pain, but through reflection. She wanted them to see the monsters they had become, the cracks in their perfect lives, the harm they had caused without even thinking. Because only then, could anything really change. And maybe, in some distant way, that's what made Maya a kind of justice the school had never seen before. She didn't just stop the cruelty. She made them watch it die. That was the final, unspoken stroke of Maya's silent masterpiece. Not to punish, not even to shame, but to end it, completely, so thoroughly that the very memory of it haunted the air. She didn't want people to just feel bad. She wanted them to feel changed, to be unable to go back to who they were before. And the only way to make that happen was not through fear or punishment, but through undeniable awareness. She didn't silence them with threats. She made them listen to themselves. Because when cruelty dies, it doesn't do so in one violent explosion. It dies slowly. It dies when laughter turns uncomfortable, when people begin second, guessing every word before they speak, when private jokes suddenly feel like confessions. And it dies loudest when no one is laughing anymore, when everyone is watching themselves the way Maya once watched them. There's a certain kind of justice in that, the kind that leaves a scar not on the body, but on the conscience. That's what Maya created. Not retribution. Not chaos. She didn't burn the school down. She didn't demand apologies. She never tried to make them suffer the way they made her suffer. Because that would have made her just like them. And Maya was never like them. She was something else entirely. Something that didn't need validation, or noise, or power. She was a mirror. And once people had seen themselves in it, they couldn't unsee it.